The armet is a type of helmet which was developed in the 15th century. It was extensively used in Italy, France, England, the Low Countries and Spain. It was distinguished by being the first helmet of its era to completely enclose the head while being compact and light enough to move with the wearer. Its use was essentially restricted to the fully armored man-at-arms. Appearance and origins. As the armet was fully enclosing and narrowed to follow the contours of the neck and throat, it had to have a mechanical means of opening and closing to enable it to be worn. The typical armet consisted of 4 pieces: the skull, the 2 large hinged cheek pieces which locked at the front over the chin, and a visor which had a double pivot, one either side of the skull. The cheek pieces opened laterally. When closed, they overlapped at the chin, fastening by means of a spring pin which engaged in a corresponding hole, or by a swivel hook and pierce staple. A multi-part reinforcement for the bottom half of the face, known as a wrapper, was sometimes added. Its straps were protected by a metal disc at the base of the skullpiece called a rondel. The visor attached to each pivot via hinges with removable pins, as in the later examples of the bastionet. This method remained in use until c. 1520, after which the hinge disappeared and the visor had a solid connection to its pivot. The earlier armet often had a smaller ventail, a piece of mail attached to the bottom edge of each cheek piece. The earliest surviving armet dates to 1420 and was made in Milan. An Italian origin for this type of helmet therefore seems to be indicated. The innovation of a reduced skull and large hinged cheek pieces was such a radical departure from previous forms of helmet that it is highly probable that the armet resulted from the invention of a single armorer soldier and not as the result of evolution from earlier forms, use and variations. The armet reached the height of its popularity during the late 15th and early 16th centuries, when Western European full-plate armor had been perfected. Movable face and cheek pieces allowed the wearer to close the helmet, thus fully protecting the head from blows. The term armet was often applied in contemporary usage to any fully enclosing helmet. However, modern scholarship draws a distinction between the armet and the outwardly similar close helm on the basis of the construction, especially the means of opening to allow them to be worn. While an armet had 2 large cheek pieces hinged at the skull and opened laterally, a close helm instead had a kind of movable bevel which was attached to the same pivot points as its visor and opened vertically. The classic armet had a narrow extension to the back of the skull reaching down to the nape of the neck, and the cheek pieces were hinged horizontally, directly from the main part of the skull. From about 1515 the Germans produced a variant armet where the downward extension of the skull was made much wider, reaching as far forward as the ears. The cheek pieces on this type of helmet hinged vertically on the edges of this wider neck element. The high-quality English Greenwich armors often included this type of armet from c. 1525. Greenwich-made armets adopted the elegant 2-piece visor found on contemporary close helmets. Armets of this form were manufactured until as late as 1615. The lower edge of such helmets often closed over a flange in the upper edge of a gorget piece. The helmet could then rotate without allowing a gap in the armor that a weapon point could enter. The armet is found in many contemporary pieces of artwork, such as Paolo Ugello's Battle of San Romano, and is almost always shown as part of a Milanese armor. These depictions show armets worn with tall and elaborate crests, largely of feathered plumes. However, no surviving armets have similar crests and very few show obvious provision for the attachment of such crests. The armet was most popular in Italy. However, in England, France and Spain it was widely used by men-at-arms alongside the salet, whilst in Germany the latter helmet was much more common. It is believed that the close helm resulted from a combination of various elements derived from each of the the preceding helmet types. Bibliography. Gravett, Christopher Tudor-Kite. Osprey Publishing, London. Oakeshott, Ewart. European Weapons and Armour, From Renaissance to the Industrial Revolution. Lutterworth Press. ISBN 0851157890.